Think for a moment about the air we breathe. We don't see it, we don't consciously think about it, but it surrounds us, influences us, and is essential to our survival. Culture is a lot like that. It's the invisible framework that shapes the way we see the world, interact with others, and even understand ourselves. But what exactly is culture? And why does it matter so much in our day-to-day lives? In today's episode, we're going to dig into the concept of culture, what it is, how it works, and some examples that might make you stop and think about the way it influences your own life. Let's start with a simple question. Have you ever really thought about what culture means? Culture is one of those words we all use, but it's surprisingly hard to define. If you ask 10 different people, you might get 10 different answers. Anthropologists, sociologists, psychologists, and even historians all have their own takes. But at its core, culture is the shared set of beliefs, values, customs, behaviors, and artifacts that define a group of people. Edward B. Tyler, one of the founders of modern anthropology, defined culture in his 1871 book, Primitive Culture, as, and I quote, that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. In simpler terms, it's everything we learn from being part of a group. It's not in our DNA, it's in our interactions, our upbringing, and our environment. But culture isn't just about traditions or rituals. It's a lens, a way of interpreting the world. It's the assumptions we make without realizing it, the stories we tell ourselves about how life works, and the rules we follow even when nobody's watching. One way to think about culture is as a shared framework that helps people make sense of the world. Imagine walking into a foreign country where everything, language, food, clothing, even gestures, is unfamiliar. Suddenly, you notice just how much of what you thought was normal is actually a product of your own cultural background. Culture operates on multiple levels. On the surface, these are the visible aspects of culture, things like food, clothing, music, language, and holidays. For example, sushi is a surface-level aspect of Japanese culture, just as pizza might be for Italian culture. On a deep level and beneath the surface are the values, beliefs, and assumptions that drive behaviors. For example, why do some cultures eat meals together as a family, while others prioritize individual schedules? The answer lies in deeper cultural values about community and individualism. Also, unspoken rules are the norms and expectations we often take for granted. For instance, in some cultures, it's polite to make direct eye contact, while in others, that same gesture might be seen as aggressive or disrespectful. So why do we have culture in the first place? What purpose does it serve? One function of culture is a guide to behavior. Culture acts as a guidebook for how to behave in society. It tells us what's acceptable and what's not, what's polite and what's rude. For example, in many Western cultures, it's customary to shake hands when meeting someone. In other cultures, bowing, kissing on the cheek, or even avoiding physical contact might be the norm. Culture helps us navigate these expectations. It is also a source of identity by giving us a sense of belonging. Culture tells us who we are and where we come from. Think about national flags, traditional clothing, or even the music you grew up listening to. These are all symbols of cultural identity. Culture is a framework for meaning. It provides us with stories, myths, and values that help us make sense of the world. Why do we celebrate certain holidays? Why do we believe in concepts like justice or freedom? These aren't universal truths. They're shaped by the cultural frameworks we inherit. Culture is a tool for adaptation, evolving over time to help groups adapt to their environments. For example, cultures in colder climates might develop customs around preserving food for long winters, while those in tropical climates might have practices centered on staying cool and hydrated. Let's bring this to life with some examples of how culture shapes our lives in ways we might not even notice. Have you ever noticed how some people are direct and to the point, while others seem to communicate in a more roundabout way? This isn't just personal preference. In many Western cultures, direct communication is valued. People are encouraged to say what they mean. But in other cultures, particularly in parts of Asia and Africa, indirect communication is preferred. It's seen as more respectful to hint at what you mean rather than state it outright. Time is another fascinating cultural concept. In cultures with a monochronic view of time, like the United States or Germany, punctuality and schedules are taken very seriously. Time is seen as linear, a resource to be managed. In polychronic cultures, like many in Latin America or the Middle East, relationships often take precedence over rigid schedules. Being late might not be considered rude. It's just a different way of prioritizing what matters. In individualist cultures, people are often encouraged to stand out and prioritize personal goals. Think of the American dream, with its emphasis on independence and personal success. In collectivist cultures, by contrast, the focus is on fitting in and contributing to the group. Success is often defined in terms of family or community achievements rather than individual accomplishments. Even our understanding of mental health is shaped by culture. In some cultures, depression might be seen as a medical condition that requires treatment. In others, it might be interpreted as a spiritual imbalance or even a moral failing. These beliefs influence whether people seek therapy, turn to religious leaders, or try to tough it out on their own. One of the most important things to remember about culture is that it's not static. It's always evolving. Think about how much cultural norms have changed over just the past few decades. For instance, attitudes toward gender roles, technology, and even food have shifted dramatically in many parts of the world. Culture adapts to new challenges, new ideas, and new ways of living. This dynamism can sometimes lead to generational clashes. Younger generations might embrace new cultural trends like social media, global fashion, or alternative lifestyles that older generations find unfamiliar or even threatening. But this tension is a natural part of cultural evolution. In today's interconnected world, cultures are blending and influencing each other in unprecedented ways. Globalization means you can enjoy Japanese sushi in New York, watch Bollywood movies in London, or listen to K-pop in Brazil. While this cultural exchange is enriching, it also raises questions. What happens to traditional cultures in a globalized world? How do we balance preserving cultural heritage with embracing global influences? Globalization has also led to the rise of subcultures. They are smaller groups with their own unique identities that often transcend national boundaries. Think of gaming culture, vegan culture, or even online meme culture. These subcultures show how fluid and adaptable human culture really is. So, how does all of this connect to you? Take a moment to think about your own cultural background. What values, beliefs, and practices did you inherit from your family or community? How have those shaped the way you see the world? And how might they be different from someone else's perspective? Culture is a powerful force, but it's not something we're locked into. Understanding your own culture and how it compares to others is the first step toward greater empathy, openness, and personal growth. Culture isn't just something we're born into, it's something we live, breathe, and even create every day. By understanding what culture is and how it works, we can begin to appreciate the richness of human diversity and perhaps even challenge some of our own assumptions about what's normal. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If this made you think about your own culture or notice the influence of someone else's, I'd love to hear about it. In our next episode, we'll further explore how culture impacts our worldview. Until then, take a moment to reflect on the invisible frameworks shaping your world. See you next time.